Randall, so nice to have you here. Thank you for joining and being part of our little Zoom review section here, where we're looking at movies that you can screen through the internationalfilmseries.com website. And again, for those just tuning in, some independent distributors are being kind enough to share the profits of anything that is made from people watching movies through the internationalfilmseries.com website with us at the IFS. And the reason that I've got Randall on here, Randall's a good friend. I've known him for a long time. And he actually was interested in seeing one of the titles that we had available on our website. It's actually a title that we did manage to screen in Munzinger, our venue, which has 400 seats on the CU Boulder campus. And it was last year actually that we screened this, and it was Hail Satan, and it was the latest film by the director Penny Lane. I'm a big fan of hers. I mean, I really enjoyed R. Nixon, which we also screened, and a documentary that was animated called Nuts, which we also screened at the IFS. And this documentary titled Hail Satan, which looks at Satanists, atheists really, was a lot of fun, very interesting. And it's got politics, it's got humor, and a little bit of everything. And I'm going to stop gabbing because Randall saw the documentary, but he also took advantage of something new that is being offered through these virtual theatrical video on demand platforms, which is that they're making it possible to interact with the directors through Q&A opportunities that are sort of live streamed on particular nights. And we're actually going to have another live stream event coming up on June 17th for a documentary that's being released tomorrow on Friday called Picture a Scientist. So I just wanted to let Randall talk about his experience with the Q&A and also, the documentary, Hail Satan. So Hail Randall, tell us what's going on.
Well, yeah. Thanks, Pablo. So just a little bit about myself. So I'm a second-generation Italian immigrant on my dad's side, and third on my mother's from England and Poland. So both my parents grew up in the 30s, and so Boulder County definitely had a lot of KKK activity. All of Colorado did in the 20s and 30s. So anti-Italian such. So that's a little bit of the background. So I'm aware of that. So that resonated as I was watching a Hail Satan with the obvious hypocrisy and the Christian nationalism that was less rampant when the documentary was made than it is now. Yeah. And one of the things that I was waiting for when I was watching the film was if they were mentioning that a lot of the Ten Commandment monuments that are all over the country were actually distributed as a promotion for the Ten Commandments movie. And
that was one of my favorite parts, actually.
Yeah. And they actually had a dedication with Charlton Heston dedicating one of the statues, and that was a great point. So with the Q&A, it was Penny Lane, Lucian Greaves, the leader of the main National Satanic Temple, and then the film critic from Vox and a professor at King's College in New York, Alyssa Wilkinson. And so they pretty much started with how the documentary was thought of. Penny Lane, one of her producers, thought it was a good subject. They contacted the Satanic Temple, and there were previously a number of attempts to do something, but they all fell through. So there was a little misgivings from Lucian Greaves, especially with, he didn't have approval on what would go into the documentary. But I think it turned out really well. And when one of the stories that the director said when it premiered at Sundance, did you see it at Sundance?
I saw it at Sundance. Yeah.
So they actually showed it twice, and one of the volunteers was randomly assigned to the movie. And when she came out and talked to the director, she changed her mind. I suspect, being Salt Lake City, she may have been a Mormon, and Mormons view themselves as rightly as a oppressed minority in mainstream Christianity. So, that's my own interpretation, but it makes sense. And another comment from Lucian Greaves was that he purposely didn't want to be selfish with the film, and it was a question of in the current environment with the George Floyd protests, what can he do, and the temple does, and his response was, we don't want to put ourselves out as an organization to try to glom on to the Black Lives Matter movement, but just show support, but not interfere with that main agenda of the protests. And that makes a lot of sense. So, and just as there were 90 people that attended the online Q&A, and that seems to be pretty well. The director herself came out of the process thinking that there's additional areas that she could investigate in the same area. She didn't actually mention very many of them, and she made a comment that there was definitely some organizational conflict that she needed to purposely not let that take over the film. So she kept it very minimal. Just mentioned that the radical element was excommunicated from the organization. I think that was pretty much they had a couple of questions, but a lot of it was background stuff and just various opinions of what happened in the doc.
Did you have any questions? Were you
No, I did not.
I just want folks who might be watching or listening to this to know is that there are these unique Q&A opportunities that kind of everything gets flattened out so that you have access to a director. And I assume that if you did have a question, you would have just been able to type it into chat, right? Or
yes, they had actual multiple ways. You could pre-submit questions via an email address or with a Twitter hashtag, or the chat itself.
And so again, the next unique event where we will have a virtual Q&A that you can access through internationalfilmseries.com is coming up on June 17th. So if and it's for another documentary, and it's a very good one called Picture a Scientist, and it's fascinating. It's well organized, and it's going to afford anybody who watches it to interact with not just the director, but also some of the scientists, some of the women scientists who had to deal with a lot of sexual harassment as they were. You mentioned your engineering background, and this is about, the systemic gender bias of academia, specifically with those that are going into things like engineering. So it's timely and definitely something for people to think about. And Randall, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share with us your experiences, and thank you also for watching any of the titles that we have on the internationalfilmseries.com site. Very much appreciate the feedback and appreciate your time, and we'll talk later, I think. So we're going to sign off, and I'd like to thank people for taking the time to hear us ramble for this. So
have a good week.
All right, you too, sir.